Hello, this is James St. James, and in this episode we're going to talk about the 6 elements from 3 points of view. Let's learn about the functional anatomy of the human body from a healer perspective so that we can reverse engineer intuitive healing so that we can re-engineer our body and mind to think and perform how we want. Let's go over how the 6 elements work from an electrical, chemical, and mechanical point of view. We already covered how we can analyze the body based on its electrical, chemical, and mechanical properties and behaviors in the first episode. Then in the second episode, we covered the 6 elements. Now we're going to cover how they relate together. If you haven't seen episode 1 and 2 in the series yet, then you will absolutely need to watch those, as there is no way possible that any of this episode is going to make sense to you without having seen them first. By understanding where the 6 elements come into play in the electrical, chemical, and mechanical models of the body, we can work on building strategies to analyze our health issues and trace them to their roots. Once we understand the problems we're facing as well as what they ultimately stem from, we can create solutions to fix those problems. First, let's start with the electrical point of view of the body. To recap, the main electrical component that we will focus on is the emotional waves that move through the fascial matrix. We're only focusing on 1 out of the 7 components that we previously covered in the first episode because understanding just the emotional aspect of electricity in the body will be enough to create healing strategies. The other ones will just be additional information that is unnecessary at this point if your goal is just to repair your body. In the more advanced levels, we will go more in depth with this, but for now, let's just focus on what is going to give us the greatest return on our mental investment. Shall we? First, let me state that the overall amount of electricity that is able to be generated is largely dependent on the electrical output of the organs. To better explain this in detail, in the organs, chemicals interact with each other, creating what are called redox reactions. Millions of these redox reactions happen every single second, creating positive and negative charges that propagate collectively throughout the surrounding tissues as waves. The resulting electricity is then transmitted through the collagen fibers and is even emitted electromagnetically. These waves moving through the fascia are what we experience as the feeling of emotions. This is an important point of understanding because a lot of people think that their emotions are just a result of their personality or some whimsical thing like universal energy and don't seek to understand their emotions any further. But I'm here to tell you that your emotions can be understood in terms of biology and physics and are not happenstance or some kind of universal phenomenon. What if your emotions were just the result of electrochemical outputs of various parts of your body? Do you think you could understand them better or even have better control over them? So let's go over how emotions are created and the electrical implications. By understanding how the emotions are produced, we can reverse engineer them so that we can analyze our emotional health, then trace it to specific parts of the body so that we can then go and fix those parts and restore our emotional health. This is a side note, you don't need to remember this, but just to clarify, a common misunderstanding that many people think that emotions are created in the brain, but really they are created by the organs and then perceived and interpreted by the brain, mainly in the amygdala, which produces what are called neurotransmitters. These are chemicals that signal various regions of the brain to increase or diminish their activity levels. And through this, how we think changes so that we can continuously adapt to every situation. And now, yes, we can use our thoughts to control our emotions, which, spoiler alert, is one of the core techniques in the healing process that we'll be covering later, but we must be clear about where the emotions are generated, how they work, and how they affect our thought and even our bodies, in order to get the right idea about how the body works. Emotions are rooted in the body much more than the brain, so stop looking at the brain to solve emotional issues, because it won't get you very far. So alright, let's get back to talking about electricity and emotions. Our emotional health can be measured by the intensity of the emotion that we are able to produce. It doesn't matter which emotion, whether it's anger or fright or even sadness, as these are very powerful and useful emotions that are natural to the human body, and we should appreciate them. When I talk about emotional health, we are going to talk about two things: which emotions you are producing and your body's current capability to produce any particular emotion. Certain emotions such as frustration, resentment, or worry can indicate a lack of support or irritability of a particular organ, as these emotions are examples of when the emotion normally produced becomes disharmonious, thus indicating underlying physiological issues. Furthermore, the ability to produce any particular emotion demonstrates the overall functionality of the respective organ and the conductivity of the extracellular matrix in the electrical channel that is associated with that particular organ. So not only are we going to use the type of emotion, but also the intensity, or lack thereof, the emotion as an indicator of emotional health. Next, let's relate the electricity to the 6 elements. By focusing on a specific emotion, you can trace it to the respective element and then relate it to the various organs, glands, electrical channels, and fascial structures that the element is associated with. For example, say that you feel that you're a fearful or shy person. Then using tracing, you can understand where in your body that emotion is coming from, and should you choose to, you can fix the corresponding organs and electrical channels so that you no longer have to live with that type of personality. There are many things that make up our personality, but the emotional states by which we operate on a default level are a huge portion of the composition of our total personality. And it's not that the fear will completely go away, it's more accurate to say that you will just have better control over that emotion so that it doesn't affect your default mind state. So in summary, the electrical shows up primarily as emotions, and we can use those to trace damage in the body so that we can then target key points that are keeping us from expressing ourselves in the way that we feel that we ideally should. This is how the electrical flow relates to emotions and how we can use emotions to trace problems within the body. Next, let's talk about the chemical aspect. The 6 elements are also represented in the chemical processes of the body. When looking at the body from this point of view, the organs have the most significant role. The structural stability and overall performance of the body tissues are mainly reliant upon the organs. When the organs associated with a particular element are working well, the rest of the body will receive that type of nourishment that is associated with that particular element. For example, the fire element is associated with carbohydrate metabolism throughout the body. If the fire element organs, which are the liver and the gallbladder, are working well along with the fire element gland and chakra, then everywhere in the body will be saturated with a proper amount of carbohydrates necessary for energy production. When it comes to the health of the body, it is necessary that all of the organs for each element are working properly, with the only exception being the organs associated with the dark element, because they have more to do with the mind and they don't actually affect the biochemistry of the body. This is just another example of how each of the elements are important for proper body chemistry when it comes to the organs. The main point is that the tissues of the body rely upon the proper biochemistry in order to function well, as the body tissues require the proper removal of waste, flow of blood, nerve signals, water, and electricity. With these things working well, cellular production and maintenance will be at their best. This relationship can be seen in such things as one's injury resistance, immune defense, blood potency, muscular strength, stamina, and even recovery rates. In addition to the flow affecting the performance of the tissues is when one of the organs or elements responsible for nurturing a certain aspect of the tissue becomes damaged, because no biological system can live without all 6 elements being present and functioning. If one of the elements is stopped, then biological processes will become hindered and cease, which can even possibly lead to death. However, there are some minor exceptions to this. I don't have time to go over them, but comment if you know what they are. Let me give you an example of the necessity of all 6 elements when it comes to the organs. So if the spleen is damaged, it won't matter how good your blood flow is to any particular tissue, because the blood cells will not be properly saturated with the necessary nutrients, because that's the role of the spleen. So the cells would lack nutrients, perform poorly, no matter how good the localized flow would be. This is why targeting the tissue-supporting organs is almost always a critical component of an effective strategy in the early stages of the reconstruction process. Oftentimes people ask me, what about my brain? How do I get smarter? When it comes to thinking better or boosting intelligence, then the answer lies mostly within the chemical aspect of the body. Because the brain is so well protected, we can almost always consider it as a contained system. The only inputs to the brain are blood flow, lymph flow, which is the lymph system in the brain, and nerve flow, for which the inputs are at the base of the skull and the flow is primarily governed by the water element. However, all elements are needed to produce mental clarity, as all the organs have a role in supporting the proper mental function. So in reality, the health of all your organs, and especially the liver, small intestine, and spleen, are going to be critical factors in your overall intelligence. So to focus on the brain itself, as you might see in some kind of biohacking podcast, would be a very foolish mistake. So by better understanding the chemistry in your body, you can better understand your organs and potentially optimize your brain functionality and the way you think. This is why our body chemistry and organs are important. Next, let's talk about the mechanical aspect of the 6 elements. The mechanics of the body can be considered the most important when it comes to tracing the symptoms we notice to their underlying issues and creating strategies to resolve those issues. The mechanics of the human body mostly relate to the muscles, bones, ligaments, tendons, cartilage, and the fascia. But for the purposes of regenerating the body from chronic stress, we can just talk about the fascia and muscles, as we're assuming that the tendons, cartilage, bones, and ligaments have no critical damage. If you do have critical damage in those types of tissues, this is no longer a stress-related issue, but rather is likely in need of medical treatment. Something that you should probably go to the hospital for. So, for the purpose of this video, we're only talking about stress-related issues. However, what you can get from these videos is a way to remove the stress from the surrounding connections of those tissues and regenerate the organs, especially the liver, to support the tissues better, with the hope that your body will become strong enough in all other areas to allow those critically damaged areas to heal properly. With that said, let's talk about the importance of the muscular structure for the purpose of healing. Proper muscle functionality relies heavily upon the smooth flow of electricity through the extracellular matrix via the 6 positive and negative electrical channels associated with the 6 elements, as well as the biochemistry of the body produced by the organs, again, associated with the 6 elements. This will give the muscles and the fascia that innervates them the nourishment, electrical flow, and flexibility needed for proper functionality. The degradation of various mechanical vectors in the body can lead to impeded organ or chemical and electrical capabilities. I just want to take a moment to note that we have come full circle now in discussing how the electrical, chemical, and mechanical aspects of the human body all affect each other, which is super cool and deep, which we are going to go over more in depth in a future season of the series. But for now, let's move on to the specifics of the degradation of mechanical structures. See, electrical disruptions in the extracellular matrix near a muscle, especially in a chemically imbalanced state, can cause muscle fatigue, cramping, or locking, which can easily become long-term or permanent damage. For the purpose of simplifying the understanding of how damage shows up in the human body in this way, I have categorized this damage into 6 different levels that we are going to cover in episode 5 of the season. Everyone has this type of damage to some degree, and over time, it can cause changes in one's walking, sitting, or overall posture. Now, this might not sound too consequential, but postural changes close to the spine and joints can cause impedances in nerve flow and blood flow to the organs, limbs, and even the brain, which can be very consequential or even deadly, as it only takes one line of force, or stress line as I call it, across the body if damaged enough to kill a person. For example, in the case of a young adult under constant stimulant abuse, the air element stress line that goes through the base of the neck can become constricted and possibly limit nerve flow to the heart, thus causing a heart attack. So this is an example of how one stress line can lead to death. This is a more extreme circumstance, however, usually a decline in major functionality happens over long periods of time, which is often what we see happening in elderly people. So hopefully your distribution of stress is more even, or preferably, we don't take on too much stress in the first place. When the stress lines constrict, it changes the posture, and the posture will change the articulation of the spine. A person who has ideal spinal flexibility will be the most resistant to stress, and consequentially, mental illness. One of the key ways that the body articulates mental functionality and physical performance is to change the curvature of the spine. If the curve opens more to the anterior or exterior, meaning the front or the back, of the spine, it will change the way that the spinal nerves connect to the organs. This will lead to a significant change in the way that the brain communicates with those organs, affecting organ function and therefore our emotional states. So this is why the health of the spine is directly related to mental performance or the lack thereof. Again, everything I share should be self-evident. So to test whether the mechanics of the spine can actually alter brain function is true for you, try slouching over and record a video of yourself talking about your life philosophy or anything that interests you. Then take a selfie video again, standing upright with your shoulders back as if you're in a military-like stance, and then just notice if the way you speak is different, the way that you think might be different, or even maybe your emotional state. Try it out and let me know your conclusion in the comments below. If you did notice a change, it's likely due to the changes in posture, articulating a difference in the blood flow and nerve connections to the organs, which has shifted your emotional and mental states. So hopefully this gives you a clear view as to why the mechanics of the human body are critical for creating healing strategies and the role it plays in overall health. Furthermore, mechanics are the easiest to see and understand, making them perfect for creating healing strategies, even for a beginner. This is why I say mechanics are the most important, but that's only for the purpose of creating strategies, especially in the early stages. Because in reality, we need all viewpoints of the body and all elements to be working together to create harmony and health. Thank you for watching. In the next episode, we're going to cover the 3 types of relationships that exist between each of the elements. If you want to learn more about the body and mind, then feel free to check out the other videos in this channel or subscribe. And if you have a question about anything, then drop it in the comments and I'll do my best to answer it. I'll see you in the next video.